Delegating well is often a challenge when we're trying to give good instructions. Too many times in the past, I have raced to give quick instructions, not delegated effectively, and as you probably heard me say before, I didn't have 10 minutes to give good instructions, but I had an hour or two to fix up the mistakes that happened because of my poor instructions. So I've sort of mapped out a bit of a planning framework, and this is an editable template that you should be able to get your head around, which is just around defining the task and who you're going to give it to, and then delegating, I guess, against the 5 whys plus how, and then thinking through what the next step is, which is follow up, right, which is part of the delegation process. So my suggestion is you to have these as a digital thing, print one out and use it as a resource for you to think about, so you get your planning right before you delegate a task, right? So you want to think about what the task is, what you want them to do, what specific outcome you want from it, so that you get that clear. We then need to talk about why. So why do you want them to do it? How does what they're doing fit into the bigger picture? Because sometimes it may not be obvious why you need them to do it and why they need to do it at a certain level of detail. All right, so confirm the ownership. Sometimes that's just one person you're going to give it to. Otherwise it might be a team. But in that team, you want to have one person who you make accountable. So who's that accountable person plus the team? You can add those in there. Set any clear deadlines and milestones in the when part. So, milestones are, draft done at this point, whatever happens to be final required by this date, so be really clear on that. Where is sort of optional. So what sort of resources might they need to draw on? What sort of tools could they use? And, are there any contacts they should be talking to about this? And then the how is, specifying standards. So often we don't specify and we don't set expectations around the standards that we want them to work to, and or the boundaries around how far we want them to go with this, right? So just be really clear on those standards, and then the boundaries, right? And then the next phase is really to agree on what support and authority. So, think about the level of authority you're delegating, and we've discussed this in other models, but, is it that you, the manager, will decide on what happens? Is it you discuss it together, and then the team member decides with, or the manager approves any exceptions? Like the team member can make a decision within certain boundaries. Anything outside that boundary, they need to talk to you. Or is it last one that full ownership happens and the team member decides and delivers for you? All right. So they're the two sort of important steps up front. The 5 whys plus how, and then let's sort of agree on the level of support and authority, and then the follow-up piece is really important. You probably want to define when this is, but then talk about it and say, okay, so what worked well in this process? What was challenging? What can we improve on next time, right? So a little bit of a reminder down the bottom here, the golden rules of delegation. Be clear, not vague. So be really specific about what you want. Delegate outcomes, not just activities. So be really careful about telling them exactly how to do something, when often your way of doing it will just be different, not necessarily better. Sometimes that's not the case. You want them to do something specifically, but make sure you delegate the outcomes, the quality expectations for those sort of things. Talk about the outcomes more than the activities. Balance that accountability with support. So you don't want to be micromanaging them, but you also don't want them to feel like they're alone in this sort of stuff. And then make sure you close that loop with sort of that feedback and good recognition of a job well done. Okay. Any questions? Give me a call. Cheers.